In the last video, we were covering the order invoice editing screen, and now we're going to the next row of information that's in that invoice editing screen. Let's take a look here, first of all, at the portal. This is kind of a complex thing to look at, so I'm going to try to preempt that and explain some things about the portal. Each time you do a line entry in the order invoice, as we stated in the last, and this is kind of a recap, they can be in one or more types of statuses as far as the order status and also as far as the storage status, which is indicated on this row. What that basically means is there are things that affect each item in an invoice individually as a product that is delivered in a time span, for example, on this invoice. This means that at some period of time, this item may be consigned and it may be in the business for a period of time. When you're giving them a copy of the invoice where they see the status on their invoice, that status may change. So when you go to their business, either to collect data or collect the actual item and bring it back, or to collect the money for what was sold, you're going to need to be able to look at your iPad or phone, or whatever you're using, and look at the status that was on the prior invoice, on this invoice, and then change it to fit what you're going to do as far as sending them an invoice. For example, if the item was sold and paid, and now you're going to collect it, and there's no discount, and the actual amount collected should include the sales tax because you're going to be paying the sales tax, not the business, then that information needs to be modified to fit what actually happened at that particular business. The portal itself, let's go look at that, has a lot of information. It has the order portal data, which is the item that is being sold or consigned in the business, and the same kind of information that you see on that screen. Plus, from the inventory screen, you're going to see the inventory information plus an image of the item, the part number, the cost basis of what this thing actually costs to make, and then the price that it's supposed to be sold at. This can work for you in another way too. If you have questions when you're at the customer site and you need to see the actual line item and the invoice information, this gives you a quick view to see what it actually is. Plus you can see at this order status how it should be marked as sold from the standpoint of visiting the business and collecting money. If you change the status and take the money, then you're going to indicate what the tax was, what the actual sales price was. You would know what the discount was, and you settle up on those items for that particular invoice for the consignment that you did, or if the item was actually sold outright as far as retail. That might also be indicated here depending on what the invoice states as far as the client that you're selling it to. Order invoice data is the person that you're actually selling it to in the record, and the information as far as what they paid and what is due. In this particular case, the amount due is 0, and the information needs to be updated when you reach the business to collect your money for each individual item that you're working with. This is highlighted in color so you just don't hit this by accident. This is to delete the record item in the thing, and this is in the database. This is only used per row basis. Why would you use this? If you made a delivery and there was an error in the information that was deleted or added to the records, you may need to delete that record and re-enter it or just delete it, period. This might be a case where somebody's constructing the invoice on the date that they're doing the invoice, and they assign something, and then the business owner says, no, I don't want to put that in there. Then you're going to go back in. By deleting it in this screen, you're taking the line item out of that row on the invoice. You have to delete it in this screen for one other reason. This screen is where you're holding that portal data, and when you delete that record, it's going to update the invoice and remove it, plus it's going to update all the charges and calculations that are done on that screen. If you try to remove the actual record in the row, which in some cases if you accidentally, for example, click on a field, you get this thing right here or this over here and you do the minus sign, it's going to delete that record and it's going to mess things up. So you do not want to do that. You only do what you can see in the actual record. Do actions. For example, in this case, do finds, print it, or export the actual information from that portal record. You're not supposed to delete the record unless you understand those items that you're taking it out, and it's also going to affect the way the invoice is written. Okay, let's go back over to the order invoice. Now we've looked at the portal. What is the location? If this item is being returned and you're going to be putting it back into a status of storage, then you're going to put in where that item is now stored. In addition to that, when you're in a business, and say for example this is some kind of art or something that's going to be put on a wall and it may be moved or for some reason, you're going to put the consigned location and the image description as far as where it's at, like on the northeast wall next to the steps. The consigned location could be that also down here. For example, this is the part number. We know what the item image description is. You can say up here, for example, it is next to the bar and right side wall over by the restrooms. And then the item would be actually pictured here. When the person goes over and looks at the back of the item, if there's a barcode on the item, they can also look for the part ID to verify that the one they're looking at is the one that they want to take back. So you can see this part ID is kind of important again. If you need to go to the inventory itself for this particular item on this record, you click the inventory, and this brings you into the inventory screen, and here is the barcode that you're looking at for that particular item. I'll explain barcodes and how they're used later, but basically there are barcodes in here. There's a way to set up the barcodes and create them within this application, and you can also scan barcodes on the iPad or iPhone, and I'll talk about that later. We'll also talk about the invoice information, and in particular I'm going to show you that it says tap the invoice ID to see the invoice. If I tap that, it's going to take me back to the particular invoice that we're working in, invoice number 1. It's going to return you so you can come right back to this location and see that particular item in the row for the item and the ID that we're talking about. This is quite interesting too. You would not be doing a quantity of an item that has an individual replication for the part ID. For example, we show a quantity of 1 in here. The only reason I do that is so that you put the proper information in there. If this is something that is sold that you have no ID on and you want to sell it in quantity, say like you're doing a special offering where the person that buys this gets 2 for the price of 1 or something like that, then you need to adjust this. Basically, the part ID would be in here. I would suggest what you do is create a second record line, because this could be returned to storage or the status may be different on one than the other if it's not going to be sold separately. Okay, so you need to understand those things. Now I know this is quite confusing and you may have to read it or go through it twice or more in order to understand how it works. But businesses that do consignment, wholesale and retail, deal with this all the time and don't have a tool to keep track of all the information that is required. Okay, let's look at the actual screen here. You can have the image of the item that is being sold in this area right here. So if there's a question of what the item is when you come up to it on the wall or wherever it's located, you can pop this up and get an actual image view of the actual item that you're working with. The paid date. The paid date is obvious. This is the date to which you could return to the business and collect the payment that they are supposed to be paying you at that date. And then you would also be collecting $22.88 worth of tax in the same time. When you go to that business, you would do a storage status over here, and this would either be consigned, damaged, delivered in the delivery truck, returned to stock, sold, or warehouse. In this particular case, it's showing sold, and sold in this particular case is different than the status over here where it's sold taxed or paid taxed, and it'll eventually be sold over here. Now this is the finishing status, meaning that you have collected the money, you've marked the item as sold, and they either paid tax or paid outright, and that affects the way that this looks over here. Now obviously when I looked at it again, there could be something that says into stock, returned. The only two that should be used when you're paid and paid tax and the status is over here when it's sold is sold. Okay, the other reasons it's used, if you go there and you find that somebody dropped it or damaged it, or in this particular case its current status is consigned, that's what should be here. If it's on the delivery truck and is being brought to a location, maybe this is a delayed invoice where you need to bring an item, then it would either be on the delivery truck or it would be in the warehouse. So you have to go to the warehouse to pick it up, or it's being returned to stock. If it's being returned, this will be the status of return to stock. This helps both you and the business that you're working in keep up to date on each individual item that you're working with. And as I said many times, the part ID is a differential to being under the best control as far as managing those items. Now, we've got this far and we know that this is the way that we're going to be using the individual lines. Let's go look at a different record that is not a retail but a wholesale. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into the first record and let's go down to the next record. Now I have a test client in here that I'm working with, and in this particular case, this is an item that is in stock. It's not sold. No, I take it back. It says that it's sold over here, so it should have been one of the two. It should be in the warehouse, so you can change it, or the reason it was returned to stock is it's now back in the warehouse, and you'll see that there is no charges, subtotal, or line total on that item. So when you go to the customer's business and you change it back into stock, maybe you're taking it back on the truck, then this would be return. And then when it gets back into stock, it'll be stock in the warehouse. So both of these have to kind of match, stock and in warehouse, or it has to be return and then in stock. So this would be stock, or if it's being returned, then this one would be on the delivery truck, return to stock. Okay, so once it's returned to stock and it's verified, then it would be back in the warehouse. I hope this is clear to you. Now, the reason we did it this way is that we don't have to customize the app again for you when you receive it. A lot of the things that happen in here can be optional depending upon how you want to do it. For example, if you're just straight away doing wholesale without discounts, then you don't have to worry about the discount. If everything you sell is minus tax, then you don't have to worry about the tax. If everything you sell is tax, then it's going to be the reverse of that. So you're going to have to worry about that and how you collect the money. So you can see the variations that you can go through when you're using this order invoice. Now, when you complete a transaction at the company, at the business that you're going to, you want to go up and actually look at the actual invoice that you're working with. So in that particular case, what you would do is you would go to that invoice and go ahead and make the modifications here, and then go to the invoice itself for the print invoice. Verify that everything has changed and everything is correct in the way that all the line items look and the balance due or the summary at the bottom is correct. And let's go back a record so that we can go back to the top and see to the first record, and you see how it changes and shows you all the information for that record with the entries in it and how it was paid. So you see the status, or it could be, in this particular case, it's paid and sold on the main page. So now you know all the information that needs to be in there. If you have any questions, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to have questions, you're going to want to go ahead and contact us using the developer. If you come over here and go down to the developer support, click on developer support and chat with us, or send an email or get online with us so that we can do a live update and explain to you, if you have questions, how to do things if you have those questions. Thank you.